It was a quiet evening on Earth when the message first arrived. A signal, faint and distant, flickered across the communication systems of the United Earth Space Command. At first, it seemed like a glitch, just another stray burst of cosmic noise, but something about it caught the attention of Dr. Leela Kaur, a leading astrophysicist at the command center. She had been monitoring interstellar frequencies for years, searching for signs of intelligent life. This, however, was different. It was structured, not random. There was a pattern. Dr. Kaur quickly alerted her superior, Commander Jace Adler. He had seen many things in his career, but this was the first time he'd felt something stir in his gut when he heard those strange words crackling through the comms. They were pleading words, though distorted by time and space. The message was unmistakably a call for help. "We are the last of our kind," the voice crackled. "Our planet is dying. We have nowhere to turn. Please come. Help us before it is too late." The signal had come from a faraway galaxy, beyond the reach of even the most advanced human explorers. It was a planet located in a system known as Valora, a place Earth's ships had never ventured before. The message was urgent, but what caught the crew's attention was something even more significant. Other advanced civilizations had already heard it, and every single one of them had turned away. Dr. Kaur analyzed the signal's origin. The advanced systems she had access to showed that the planet in question had been in a state of slow collapse for centuries. It was clear that the alien species once living there had reached the height of their technological achievements, only to watch their world fall apart. Wars, environmental decay, and internal struggles had worn them down. Yet despite their immense knowledge, they couldn't solve their own problems, and now they were begging for help. The signal's message was sent out to every galactic empire known to the universe. The great, powerful beings who had mastered the stars were contacted first, but they did nothing. They saw no hope for the dying planet. There were no resources left worth extracting, no technology worth salvaging. The message was ignored, or worse, dismissed. It wasn't just a matter of politics or war. It was a matter of simple survival. The larger empires had no interest in helping a species that had already failed. But Earth's response was different. Commander Adler sat in the briefing room with his team. They were a mix of military officers, scientists, and diplomats, the best humanity had to offer. As he listened to the details, he felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility. The decision had to be made swiftly, but there was no guarantee of success. There was no doubt that the planet they would be traveling to was in crisis. There were no other ships in the galaxy coming to the rescue. The other civilizations had written the species off, believing that saving them would be too difficult, too costly. "Should we even try?" asked Captain Evelyn Pierce, a senior officer who had led many exploratory missions. Her voice was steady, but her eyes reflected the same concern that had gripped the rest of the room. Commander Adler took a long breath. "We're the only ones who will. It's our responsibility to answer their call, no matter how difficult the journey may be." The team was silent for a moment. Then, Dr. Kaur spoke up, her voice filled with conviction. "The message isn't just asking for help. It's asking for hope. The other civilizations have abandoned them, but we don't have to. This is humanity's chance to prove that we can make a difference when no one else will." The room fell into quiet agreement. Despite the risks, despite the unknowns, there was no turning back. If they didn't act, who would? Earth had always prided itself on being a species that cared for others, a species that valued compassion and unity. Now they would put those values to the ultimate test. The mission was set in motion. A fleet was assembled, and the crew prepared for the long journey ahead. It wasn't just a mission of exploration or rescue. It was a statement. Humanity wasn't afraid to stand up when others had turned their backs. The galaxy might have written off the alien species on Valora, but humanity was ready to give them a chance. As the fleet departed Earth, Commander Adler stood at the bridge, staring out at the stars. He knew the path ahead would be fraught with challenges, but he had faith in the strength of his crew, and the power of human determination. They would do whatever it took to bring hope to a dying world. And in doing so, they would show the universe that humanity was different. The message had been received, and now humanity would answer. The journey to the distant planet was long, but the crew of the U.S. Resolute moved with purpose. As they sailed through the endless blackness of space, the stars outside their ship shone like distant beacons, reminders of how far they had come and how far they still had to go. Commander Jace Adler stood at the helm, watching the stars pass by as the ship's engines hummed steadily. His thoughts were focused on the task ahead. No one had ever attempted a mission like this before. The fate of an entire alien species rested on their shoulders. The crew, too, was deeply focused. Dr. Layla Kaur worked tirelessly in the ship's laboratory, analyzing every piece of data she could get from the alien distress signal. She had spent countless hours studying the signal's patterns, looking for anything that could give them an edge in helping the alien species. As the ship sped through space, she and her team of scientists also worked on solutions for the planet's environmental problems, though they knew they wouldn't have all the answers until they arrived. Captain Evelyn Pierce was equally dedicated, keeping her crew in high spirits and ensuring that everyone on board stayed prepared for whatever lay ahead. She had led many space missions, but none of them had felt as important as this one. This wasn't just another mission. It was a chance to prove that humanity had something the rest of the galaxy didn't: hope. The ship's communications officer, Lieutenant Kara Oren, sat at her station, monitoring any incoming messages. Though she often spent her time intercepting messages from distant planets, nothing compared to the tension of this mission. Every day, she looked out at the stars, knowing that a team of advanced aliens had once been capable of saving their own world, and now they needed help. She couldn't stop thinking about what it meant that all the great galactic empires had refused to help them. "We'll get there," she whispered to herself, reassuring her own doubts as much as anyone else's. The crew knew that, though the journey was full of uncertainty, it was also a chance to do something meaningful. Their hearts were heavy with the knowledge that no one else was coming. The alien species on the planet Valora had been abandoned, left to die by their own supposed allies. But humanity didn't give up that easily. Days turned into weeks as the Resolute traveled across the galaxy. They passed through asteroid fields, navigated nebula, and encountered strange new cosmic phenomena, all the while drawing closer to their destination. The crew worked together seamlessly, each individual performing their role with quiet professionalism. Though some moments were difficult, there was an unspoken bond between them all, a shared commitment to succeed. It was a bond formed not by chance, but by purpose. Finally, the ship reached the edge of the Valora system. The planet loomed before them, a broken shell of what it had once been. The air shimmered with the remnants of a once thriving atmosphere, but the beauty of the planet had faded. The once blue skies were now tinged with red and orange, and patches of land were covered in dry, cracked earth. From a distance, it looked almost peaceful, as if it were simply sleeping, but the reality was much harsher. Commander Adler looked out at the planet with a mix of determination and sorrow. The alien species that lived there had once been a mighty civilization, their cities stretching high into the sky, their technology advanced beyond anything Earth could imagine. But now, all that remained were ruins and broken dreams. It wasn't just the environment that was crumbling. The people themselves were scattered and divided, struggling to hold on to the remnants of their culture. "Captain, we're in orbit," Lieutenant Oren announced as the ship hovered just above the planet's surface. "Understood. Prepare the landing party," Captain Pierce responded. "We've come this far. Now it's time to make contact." The ship's landing shuttle was readied, and a small team of humans, led by Commander Adler and Dr. Kaur, suited up for the journey to the surface. The atmosphere outside was thin, and the planet's temperature fluctuated dangerously, but the humans were prepared. They had technology to shield them from the worst effects, and their mission was clear: to offer help, to understand, and to unite the alien factions. As they descended through the turbulent atmosphere, the landscape below came into sharper focus. Large, broken cities dotted the planet's surface, evidence of the great civilization that had once thrived there. But now, the cities were empty, their buildings crumbling. The few surviving aliens were spread out in isolated settlements, afraid to trust anyone. They had been betrayed too many times. The shuttle landed with a gentle thud, and the crew stepped out onto the dry, dusty surface. The air was thin and warm, but the humans had prepared for the harsh conditions. They scanned the area, knowing that the first contact with the alien species could be the most difficult. "We need to approach this carefully," Dr. Kaur said as she looked around. "We don't know what kind of tensions are running between the factions, but we've been given a chance. Let's not waste it." Commander Adler nodded, his eyes scanning the horizon. "Agreed. We're not here to fight. We're here to help. Let's show them that." The crew's mission was just beginning, but the challenge ahead was clear. They had to unite a broken world, heal deep wounds, and offer hope to a civilization that had lost everything. As the humans began their walk toward the distant settlement, they knew it wouldn't be easy, but they had one thing that the other galactic empires didn't: the belief that no one should be left behind. And for that reason, they would fight for the chance to save them. The dust of Valora clung to the boots of the human crew as they ventured deeper into the planet's seared landscape. The once great cities of the alien civilization now lay in ruins, their towering structures reduced to rubble, swallowed by time and neglect. The crew's shuttle had landed on a flat stretch of land outside one of the largest cities, where the remnants of a once thriving population now lived in scattered, isolated communities. As Commander Jace Adler led the way, his eyes scanned the horizon, taking in the broken beauty of the world. There were no signs of movement in the immediate vicinity, but the air felt heavy with history. The ghosts of a once proud civilization haunted every step. "Stay alert," he said to his team, his voice low but firm. "We don't know what we're walking into." Dr. Leela Kaur walked beside him, her mind racing with thoughts of how to fix the planet's many problems. She could already see the damage in the atmosphere, the signs of years of unchecked industrial use and warfare. The planet's resources were stretched thin, and its environment was rapidly decaying. The message the crew had received hadn't been an exaggeration. Valora was dying, and without help, it would be lost forever. As they approached the outskirts of the city, they saw their first sign of life. A small group of alien survivors stood near a collapsed building, watching the humans cautiously. The aliens were tall and slender, their skin a pale grayish color, and their eyes were large, luminous, and filled with both curiosity and wariness. They wore simple, weathered clothing, and their faces carried the weight of years of struggle. The humans stopped a few meters away, giving the group space, but the tension was palpable. The alien species had endured so much, and trust was not something easily earned. The crew understood this. Dr. Kaur stepped forward cautiously, offering a friendly smile as she raised her hands in peace. "We come in friendship," she said, her voice calm but filled with urgency. "We want to help. Your planet, your people, need assistance. We have the technology to restore the environment and rebuild what was lost, but we must work together." The leader of the small group, an older alien with deep-set eyes and a stern expression, stepped forward. His voice was soft, but it carried the weight of experience. "Why? Why would you help us? The others, our neighbors, have abandoned us. We have no more allies. We are too broken to be saved." Dr. Kaur hesitated, knowing that the answer to that question was at the heart of why they were here. "Because we believe that every life is worth saving," she said simply. "Humanity doesn't leave people behind. We understand loss, but we also know the power of second chances." The alien's eyes narrowed, but he did not retreat. Instead, he studied the humans carefully, as if searching for any hint of deception. "And what will you ask in return?" he questioned, his voice tinged with suspicion. Commander Adler spoke up then, his voice steady. We ask for nothing, only that you work with us. If we don't unite, your world will be lost. We cannot do this alone. For a moment, the alien leader said nothing. Then, after what felt like an eternity, he nodded slowly. Very well. You may speak to our people, but you must understand. We are fractured. There are factions that still hold to the old ways of war, and others who no longer believe in unity. It will take much more than words to bring us together. Dr. Kaur nodded. We understand, but we've come prepared. We can offer solutions for the environmental crisis, food shortages, and power. We want to show you that it's possible to rebuild together. The leader's expression softened, but only slightly. Then come. You will meet the others, and you will see for yourself what has become of us. The crew followed the alien leader through the ruined streets, the echoes of their footsteps mixing with the distant hum of the planet's dying machines. The city, once a marvel of alien technology, was now eerily silent, with only the occasional whisper of wind through shattered windows. The humans couldn't help but feel the weight of the history that had been lost here. They soon arrived at a large square, where several more aliens had gathered. These were the survivors, the ones who had not yet given up hope. Some were older, others younger, but all carried the scars of a civilization in decline. Some of them looked at the humans with hope, while others were filled with distrust. The leader spoke to the crowd, introducing the humans as visitors who had come to offer help. The reaction was mixed. Some murmured in agreement, while others scoffed, unwilling to believe that anyone would bother to help a species on the brink of extinction. The division was clear. Dr. Kaur stepped forward once more, her voice rising above the murmurs. We don't promise an easy solution, but we can promise that we will not give up on you. We believe in second chances, and we believe that you deserve one. There was a long silence before one of the younger aliens, a female with dark, expressive eyes, spoke. How do we know you're not like the others, who promised us salvation and then left when things became difficult? Commander Adler spoke up, his voice filled with resolve. Because we are human, and when we make a promise, we keep it. The room fell silent again, but this time, there was a sense of something shifting in the air. Hope was stirring, a quiet, fragile thing, but it was there. And as the humans stood among the alien survivors, they knew that this was just the beginning. They had come to offer a lifeline to a dying world. And despite the challenges ahead, they would not turn away. The humans had made their first step toward healing the planet Valora, but they knew the real challenge was just beginning. Commander Jace Adler and Dr. Layla Kaur had hoped that their words would inspire the alien survivors to come together. Yet, as they soon discovered, the divisions between the various factions were deep, and unity would not come easily. The city square was filled with whispers and murmurs as the aliens discussed the offer of help. Some seemed open to the idea, while others were skeptical, their eyes filled with distrust. It was clear that the leadership of Valora had splintered into multiple factions, each with their own ideas on how to survive and rebuild. Some wanted to fight for what was left, while others sought peace through cooperation. But the wounds of war and betrayal ran deep, and many were unwilling to trust anyone, especially outsiders. Dr. Kaur watched the alien faces, trying to read their expressions. She knew that healing Valora wasn't just about providing technology or resources. It was about rebuilding trust and convincing these people that cooperation was their only path to survival. We have to start small, Dr. Kaur said quietly to Commander Adler, who stood nearby. We can't expect them to all agree overnight. The old wounds run too deep. Commander Adler nodded, his gaze still on the group in front of them. He could see the frustration in their faces. They were tired of fighting, tired of hoping. It wasn't just the planet's resources that had been drained. It was their spirit. The humans would need to give them something more than just technology. They needed to offer a reason to believe. I know, Adler replied, but we have to try. If we don't, Valora is done for. The alien leader, whom the crew had first met, stepped forward again. His expression was serious, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Perhaps hope, or perhaps exhaustion. He addressed the gathered crowd, his voice carrying across the square. Strangers have come to us. They offer help when none have. We have no reason to trust them, but we have even less reason to trust ourselves. If we remain divided, we will fall. If we unite, perhaps there is a chance. But the choice is not mine alone. It is yours. He looked around at the other survivors, waiting for their response. Some nodded in agreement, while others shook their heads in disbelief. The rift between the factions was evident, and it was clear that the path to unity would be anything but smooth. Dr. Kaur stepped forward again, this time addressing the crowd. "We're not asking you to forget the past," she said, her voice steady and calm. "But we are asking you to think about the future. Your planet, your people, are on the brink of extinction. This isn't just about survival. It's about giving your children and grandchildren a chance at a better life. It's about hope." The words hung in the air, and for a moment there was silence. The weight of the situation was settling in. Commander Adler could see the struggle in the faces of the aliens. They wanted to believe, but trust had been broken too many times before. One of the younger aliens, a male with sharp features and bright eyes, stood up. "What do you expect us to do?" he asked, his voice filled with anger. "We've been betrayed by our own people, by the so-called leaders who promised us salvation and then disappeared. Why should we believe that you won't do the same?" The question was sharp, and it cut through the tension in the air. The crew of the U.S. Resolute had heard similar doubts before, but this time the stakes were higher. They couldn't afford to be discouraged. The young alien's voice was filled with frustration, but it was also a cry for something more, for answers, for change, for hope. Commander Adler stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "I can't promise you that we have all the answers," he said, "but I can promise you this. We will stay. We will not leave until we've done everything we can to help you. We came here because we believe in you, and we will fight with you, not for our own gain, but because we believe that every civilization deserves a chance to live." There was a long pause. The alien in front of them stared hard at the humans, his face a mask of doubt. But something in Adler's words seemed to break through. The young alien finally lowered his gaze, his anger giving way to something else, perhaps confusion, perhaps curiosity. "Perhaps we can try," he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I warn you, it will not be easy. We are divided, and the wounds of our past run deep." Dr. Kaur nodded, a small smile on her face. "We understand. We don't expect miracles. But we can take the first step together." The alien leader, who had been watching quietly, nodded. "Then let us begin." As the humans and aliens began to discuss their next steps, it became clear that the road ahead would be long and filled with challenges. The survivors of Valora had their own scars, emotional and physical, that would not heal overnight. But for the first time in a long time, there was a glimmer of hope. The humans had not come to Valora with the promise of easy solutions. They had come with something far more powerful, the belief that every life is worth saving. And in that belief, they had planted a seed of hope. Now, it was up to the alien survivors to water it, to nurture it, and to decide whether they would unite and rebuild, or let their planet fade away into the void. The days following the tense meeting were filled with uncertainty, but something had shifted in the hearts of the alien survivors. Commander Jace Adler and Dr. Leela Kaur knew they had taken the first step toward healing Valora, but they also understood that there was a long road ahead. The aliens had agreed to try working with the humans, but old habits and mistrust didn't disappear overnight. The first challenge was organizing the survivors into groups. The factions, which had once been separate and hostile, needed to start communicating with one another. There were some who wanted to preserve the old ways of war, believing that they could win back what was lost. Others, however, were more open to change, seeing that unity was their only chance at survival. Dr. Core worked tirelessly, meeting with the alien leaders from each faction to understand their needs and concerns. She listened carefully to each group, taking notes on what resources they needed and how they viewed the future. Despite the difficulties, she felt a sense of hope rising within her. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep going. Commander Adler, on the other hand, focused on logistics. He worked with the human engineers to set up temporary shelters and food supply systems for the survivors. The U.S. Resolute had brought along enough equipment to provide for the survivors until longer-term solutions could be put in place. But even the best technology couldn't solve everything. The survivors had to be willing to work together to rebuild their society. The alien leader, who had first welcomed the humans to Valora, called for another meeting. This time, the factions were more open to the idea of coming together, though many still resisted. They gathered in the same city square where the humans had first made contact, the towering ruins of the once great buildings casting long shadows over the group. The alien leader stood at the front, his posture firm but weary. The humans have offered us their help. They have brought food, shelter, and technology. They have also shown us something we have forgotten, the possibility of peace. He paused, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. But I know many of you are still uncertain. I understand your fear. We have been betrayed before. But we must ask ourselves, what do we have to lose? One of the more vocal factions, a group of older aliens who had seen much of the conflict, spoke out. We have lost everything, an elder alien said, his voice full of sorrow. Our cities are in ruins. Our people are scattered. What more is there to save? The leader turned to the elder. There is still life. There are still survivors. And there is still a chance to rebuild. Dr. Core stepped forward, her voice calm and firm. We have seen what your world once was, what it can be again. The technology we bring can restore your environment, clean the air, and make your planet habitable again. But we cannot do it alone. We need all of you to work together. The elder alien looked at her, his expression softening slightly. And what do you ask in return? We ask for nothing, Dr. Core replied. All we ask is that you put aside your differences and come together. If you can do that, if you can work together, then Valora can rise again. There was a long silence as the crowd of aliens considered her words. Some seemed to nod in agreement, while others remained uncertain. The scars of war and division ran deep, and it would take time to heal them. But Dr. Core could see something stirring in their eyes, a flicker of hope, just as it had been when they first landed. The young alien who had questioned them earlier stood up again. I don't know if we can ever forget the past, he said, his voice hesitant. But I do know one thing. We cannot survive alone. We need help. Maybe we can try. His words were met with murmurs from the crowd. Slowly, the other factions began to speak up, their voices filled with hesitation, but also with a glimmer of hope. The humans had given them something they hadn't felt in years, the belief that they could rebuild, that they could start over. Commander Adler stepped forward, his voice strong. The first step is the hardest, but we've already taken it. Now we need to work together, no matter how difficult it is. We'll be with you every step of the way. The alien leader nodded. Then we begin. The next few days were a flurry of activity. The survivors, under the guidance of the humans, began organizing into work groups. They cleared debris from the cities, began repairing what they could, and set up systems to distribute food and water. The humans provided the technology to help speed up the process, but it was the cooperation of the aliens that made it possible. It wasn't easy. Old tensions flared up more than once, and there were moments when it seemed like the fragile alliance might fall apart. But each time, the humans reminded them of the promise of a better future. They worked alongside the aliens, side by side, showing them that peace wasn't just a dream. It was something that could be built, one small step at a time. The environment was also improving. Dr. Core and her team worked with the aliens to restore the planet's atmosphere, using technology to cleanse the air and filter the toxins that had built up over years of industrial abuse. It would take time, but already there was a noticeable difference. The skies, once filled with smog, began to clear, and the first signs of life returned to the planet's surface. Though the work was far from finished, the crew of the U.S. Resolute saw the first true signs of progress. The aliens were no longer divided by their past, but were instead starting to look forward, to imagine a future where they could thrive again. And as the sun set over the ruins of Valora, Commander Adler stood with Dr. Kor, watching the progress they had made. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. "This is just the beginning," he said softly. Dr. Kor nodded, a small smile on her face. "Yes, but it's a start we can be proud of." The progress on Valora was undeniable. Day by day, the survivors of the alien planet worked alongside the humans to rebuild what had been lost. The air grew cleaner, the ruins of the cities slowly transformed into places of hope, and new crops began to sprout where the soil had been poisoned. But as the days passed, the shadow of Valora's past began to loom larger, and the need to confront it became unavoidable. Commander Jace Adler knew that the physical rebuilding of the planet was only part of the challenge. The true test would come when the factions faced the deeper wounds of betrayal, distrust, and fear. The history of the planet, filled with broken promises and wars, was something that couldn't be ignored. To build a lasting peace, they needed to face the past together. One afternoon, as the sun hung low in the sky, the alien leader called for another meeting. This time, it was not just the survivors, but also the humans. The purpose was clear: to finally confront the division that still plagued their world, to talk openly about what had happened and what needed to change. Dr. Leela Kor and Commander Adler arrived at the meeting site, a newly restored city hall that had once been the heart of Valora's government. The building was still scarred by the ravages of war, but it stood as a symbol of their hope to rebuild. The survivors gathered in the large hall, their faces tense, their voices low as they whispered among themselves. The alien leader stood at the front, his hands clasped together. "We have come far in the last few weeks. The humans have helped us start over, and we have begun to heal the land. But now we must face the truth. We must confront the things we have hidden from for too long." The room fell silent as the leader's words echoed in the hall. The air was thick with the weight of unspoken fears, and the humans could sense the growing tension among the aliens. This was the moment where they would either choose to heal together or let the past tear them apart once more. "I will begin," the alien leader continued, his voice steady but filled with sorrow. "Many of you know me as a leader, but I was not always so. I rose to power when our people were desperate. And in my desperation, I made choices that I regret deeply. I promised peace, but instead I led us into war. I trusted others who betrayed us. I was blinded by the idea of victory, and I ignored the suffering of our people." He paused, and the weight of his words settled on the crowd. Some of the survivors nodded, their expressions hardening with the memories of the past. Others looked down, ashamed. The leader's confession had stirred something in them, a mix of anger, sorrow, and regret. Dr. Kor stepped forward, her voice gentle but firm. "We understand," she said. "You were not the only one to make mistakes. Every person in this room carries the burden of the past. But we can't change what happened. We can only decide what happens next." A young alien, his face scarred by battle, stood up. "How can we trust you?" he asked, his voice filled with pain. "How can we trust each other after all that has happened? We've lost so much." Dr. Kor met his gaze, her heart heavy with the weight of his words. "Trust is earned," she said softly, "and it's built one step at a time. We may never forget what has happened, but we can choose to build something better. We can choose to forgive." The room was still, as the young alien's words hung in the air. The silence stretched on, and Commander Adler could see the struggle in the faces of the survivors. It was clear that the pain of the past wasn't something they could just let go of. But perhaps, just perhaps, they could begin to move forward. An older alien, who had been silent up until this point, spoke. I lost my family in the war. My children were taken from me. How can I forgive those who caused so much pain? His voice cracked, and the sorrow was unmistakable. Another alien, a woman with dark eyes and a calm demeanor, stood beside him. I too have lost, she said. But I've also seen the damage we've done to each other. We've destroyed our world. And for what? To hold on to our anger. To hold on to revenge. What will it bring us, except more pain? Her words were like a balm to the wounds in the room. Slowly, others began to speak up. Some shared their pain, others their regrets. The meeting turned into a space for healing, where the aliens could confront the past and begin to let go of the bitterness that had held them captive for so long. Commander Adler and Dr. Kor exchanged a look. This was the moment they had hoped for, but it had come in a way they hadn't expected. It wasn't about offering a solution or a promise. It was about allowing the survivors to come to terms with their past and decide, together, to move forward. As the meeting ended, the alien leader stood once more. We cannot change what happened, he said, but we can choose how we rebuild. We can choose to forgive, and we can choose to trust. The road ahead will not be easy, but if we walk it together, we may find a future that is worth the struggle. There was no cheering, no loud declarations, but the room was filled with something that had been absent for far too long. The quiet hope that they could start anew. The survivors of Valora had faced their past, and while the wounds would not heal overnight, they had taken the first step toward true reconciliation. As the humans and aliens left the meeting, Commander Adler turned to Dr. Kor. It's not over, he said softly. But this was important. Dr. Kor nodded, her eyes filled with quiet optimism. Yes, now they know they have a choice. The days after the meeting were filled with quiet determination. The survivors of Valora, having faced their painful past and taken the first steps toward forgiveness, now focused on the future. The work of rebuilding continued, but now it had a different sense of urgency. It was no longer just about survival. It was about creating a new way of life, one based on cooperation and hope. Commander Jace Adler and Dr. Leela Kor observed the progress with a quiet pride. The city, once in ruins, was slowly coming back to life. New buildings were being constructed, food supplies were becoming more abundant, and the air, once thick with toxins, was clearing more each day. It wasn't perfect, but it was something, and something was better than nothing. The factions, once fractured and distrustful, were beginning to work together. The divisions that had seemed insurmountable just weeks ago were now starting to fade. The aliens, though still carrying the scars of their past, were finding common ground. The humans had shown them that there was a path forward, if they were willing to take it. Dr. Kor stood at the edge of a newly cleared park, watching as alien children played in the grass, their laughter echoing through the air. It was a sound that had been absent from Valora for far too long. She had seen the darkness that had gripped this planet, but now there was light. The children's carefree joy was proof of that. Look at them, Dr. Kor said, her voice soft with emotion, as she turned to Commander Adler. They're starting to believe. The next generation won't have to carry the weight of the past. Adler nodded, his gaze following the children. It's hard to believe it's the same place. Just a few weeks ago, this was all rubble. Yes, Dr. Kor agreed. But it's not just the land that's changing. It's the people. The survivors have found something they thought they had lost. Hope. They both stood in silence for a moment, taking in the scene. The sky above was clear, a bright blue that hadn't been seen in years. The sun bathed the city in warmth, a stark contrast to the cold shadows of war that had once loomed over it. As they turned to leave, the alien leader approached them, his face serious but hopeful. We have made progress, but there is still much to be done, he said. We have learned from you, and we are starting to trust again. But we cannot forget that rebuilding takes time. Dr. Kor smiled gently. We understand. No one expects everything to be fixed overnight. But you're on the right path, and we'll be here every step of the way." The alien leader nodded. "We are grateful. You have not only brought us technology and resources, you have brought us something more valuable, an understanding of what it means to work together, to care for one another. We will not forget that." Commander Adler placed a hand on the leader's shoulder. "The road ahead is still long, but you've already taken the hardest step. You've chosen to move forward together." As the sun dipped below the horizon, the survivors gathered in the newly restored city center, where the first real celebration in years was about to take place. It wasn't a grand affair, but it didn't need to be. The people of Valora, human and alien alike, had learned to value something simple yet profound: community. The celebration was filled with laughter, music, and the sharing of food. For the first time in a long while, there was no fear, no suspicion. There was only the present, an opportunity to celebrate what they had achieved and to look forward to what was still possible. Dr. Kor and Commander Adler watched as the alien and human survivors mingled, talking, laughing, and working together. It was a beautiful sight, and for both of them, it was a reminder of why they had come to Valora in the first place. They hadn't come to conquer or to claim something for themselves. They had come to help, to show these people that they didn't have to face the darkness alone. And now, as they watched the scene before them, they knew that their mission had succeeded. For the first time since the U.S. Resolute had landed on Valora, the crew felt a sense of peace. They had done what they set out to do. The people of Valora were no longer a broken species struggling to survive. They were a people on the brink of a new beginning, a future where they could thrive. As the night went on, Commander Adler looked out at the stars above. He had always believed that humanity's greatest strength was not in its technology or its military power, but in its ability to come together in the face of adversity. And now, that strength had been shared with another world. He turned to Dr. Kor, his voice quiet. "We've done it, Layla. We've made a difference." Dr. Kor smiled, her eyes bright with pride. "Yes, Jace, we've given them a chance, and they're taking it." Together, they watched the people of Valora dancing beneath the stars, a symbol of what could be achieved when people chose hope over fear, cooperation over division, and peace over war. And as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Commander Adler knew that this was just the beginning. There was still much to be done, but the seeds of a new future had been planted, and with time, they would grow into something beautiful.